Good, I got you guys good, well trained. You all stand up right now. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. O heavenly King, the Comforter, the Spirit of truth, art everywhere and fills all things, treasury of blessings, giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us from every impurity, and save our souls, a good one, through the prayers of our holy fathers. Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen.
Amen.
If those who are on, if you want to text me, I will try to look at my comments on my phone because I can't see them on the iPhone because I'm technically challenged in so many different ways. But and if there's a problem with the sound, let me know as well. But we should be.
I'm gonna go check the sound right now.
Yeah, go check the sound. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah, it's good. All right, so if you want, I have my phone here and you can ask me questions. So, this is class 2 of the Nativity cycle. So if you remember the last class, we had that super exciting class. We went through all those services that we do leading up, beginning prior, 2 Sundays prior, which is this Sunday, all the way through the Feast of the Meeting of the Lord, and we kind of went through that. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to delve deeper into the actual services of Nativity and look at why we have all these readings, because some of the services you have 8 Old Testament readings and all this other stuff. So we'll learn about why the church has these particular readings and hymns, because some of the hymns are... When you hear the tropar, remember tropar is like your main theme song. When you hear the tropars, invariably it's going to lead you to what the church is thinking about either the service or the saint or the readings or what's going on. So they're very... I need to stand here. People can't see me. So people need to be able to, so listen to those. And so we'll go through that today all the way up through the church, the service of the circumcision on New Year's Day. And then the next class, next week, we're going to do Theophany and Meeting of the Lord, which completes technically the Nativity cycle. So we'll learn about all the services that we do during Theophany and for the Meeting of the Lord and why we do. And so, again, 2 books I recommend. First, Father Thomas Hopgo's The Winter Pascha. And that's how he sets it up, by the way, going all the way back, all the way through the Meeting of the Lord, which has all the wonderful readings. So Father Thomas Hopgo's, available from St. Vladimir's Press. And again, to follow the actual service, starting on Christmas Eve through Christmas Day, the handy-dandy OCPC, which I shut down. One of my first jobs I did when I became Secretary of the OCA, I shut down OCPC. Drove to Cleveland with a group of people, loaded up the warehouse, brought it to St. Vladimir's Press, and said, "You guys deal with this." And so now OCPC belongs to St. Vlad's Press, but we get, when they sell, they get, what do you call it?
Kickback?
Not kickbacks, that's the wrong word. Residuals or whatever, yeah. So anyway, they're reprinting these. So there we go. So in all our services, I'm going to read that. So in all our services, they're steeped in the hymnology and the readings. We know this, right? And they're not just, they're very particularly chosen. So it's not as if they just said, oh, let's do this one here. It was really chosen, and it actually worked itself out over time. Because if you look in some of the early church services that we still have, and some of the readings and the hymns were different than what evolved to what they were. And I always think of like a group of monks sitting around arguing over, well, no, we should have this reading, or no, we should have that reading, until they came up with, what was decided. By the way, rule of thumb, the shorter the tropar, the older it is, right? So if you have like a really short tropar, like, oh, Saint Parthenousieus, pray to God for us because you love us and everything is great, and it ends, that means it's probably an old one.
We had one pretty recently.
Yeah, there was one recently, yeah, and I said, oh, and I think I turned to you and I said, that's an old tropar because it's so short. It's as the church they got longer and longer and longer, and then if you read like the ones they did from the recent saints that they canonized, it's like super long. And it's like, go back to the original, It was quick, short, to the point, boom. But whatever. So as you hear these services, and I recommend, you download them or get the book and follow along when we're doing the services, because they're really, really interesting, and every single time. And I've heard this my entire life. I've been a priest 25, coming up on 26 years. I've heard these over and over again, and invariably I'll be sitting there or standing during the service, and something will hit me, and I'm like, I never heard that before. That never hit me. And I'll say, wow, that's really interesting. I got to look that up when I get back. And I usually forget by the time I get to my house. But I can't tell you how many times it happens that you think you know the reading, and then something hits you. And I've thought a lot about this, actually. And I think what happens is, as you have different experiences in your life, those readings speak to you in a different way, because it speaks to that experience at that time and that place. And that's why it hits you. Because, I needed to hear that. Or, this connects with that. And, it's something you're just always doing it. I talk to older priests, and they have the same thing. It's like, yeah, I've read that God knows how many times, but this hit me this time. So remember that. It's really interesting. So, Father Shimon, I didn't bring that book over. He has a beautiful book on a collection of his sermons. And there are not a lot of them, but there are a few of them. And when he gets to the Christmas sermons, he has about 4 or 5 of them in there. He says this really beautiful thing about this. He says, with these words, something changes in our life. The very air we breathe and the entire mood of the church life. It is as if we perceive far away the first light of the greatest possible joy, the coming of God into the world. And that's the great way to introduce what these readings are. It's that first glimmer of light of the joy coming into the world because of Christ being incarnate. And so by listening to those words, and that's why the church sets it up. It's very interesting. You'll notice this on Holy Week. We take a step forward, and we kind of pull back a little bit. And then we take another step forward, and we kind of pull back. And we slowly move towards that final revelation or theophany. And it's the same with Christmas. We kind of move forward, then we take a little step back. And it gives us time to really contemplate and think and what is going on. So I want to set a back set, so a little theology, right? Because you like theology, right, Basil? You have great questions for me all the time, deep questions. So this is from St. Gregory of Nyssa. Not our St. Gregory, he's another St. Gregory. For though he appeared as man, yet he was not in all things subject to the laws of humanity. That he was born of a woman, savored of lowliness. Virginity, however, that attends his birth shows that he transcended mankind. His carrying in the womb is joyful, his birth immaculate. His coming forth without pain, his nativity free of blemish, neither taking rise from the will of the flesh, nor brought forth in sorrow. For since she who by her fault has brought death to our nature was condemned to bring forth it in sorrow, it was fitting that the mother of life should bring forth in joy. And at that hour, and the shadows began to retire, and the immense gloom of the night was forced back by the splendor of the light, Christ, through this virginal incorruption, comes to share the life of mortal men. For death has reached the boundary of the domination of sin, and now it moves towards nothingness because of the presence of the true light, which by its evangelical rays have given light to the whole world. That sets the stage. There's something happening here that is overturning mankind. And when he refers to, it's a bit misogynistic, but, talking about how sin came into the world, they blame Eve, right? Eve tempted Adam, and by that they turned away from God. And so that's why Mary is often called the second Eve, the new Eve, the one who restored. Because as she turned away from God, Eve, the next Mary turns to God. She says yes to him perfectly, fully, completely, without reservation. And that's the great mystery. That's why it's so important. That's why she has that. Yeah.
Don't they use the term lowliness?
Yeah, there's lowliness. Oh, I got to find which part. Oh, yeah. That he was born of a woman, savored of lowliness.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Okay,
so she was not in high...
No. That's actually talking about humanity. So, in other words, God, in his divinity, is taking the lowliness
of us.
Of humanity.
Okay,
right?
I thought it was talking about Mary.
That's the divine condescension, is what the church calls it.
Okay.
That he took on that human flesh. He came from the heights to come to our lowliness. And so that's why we see that happening.
It's just like when you talk to a child, you have to meet them on their level.
Yeah, you got, and so he's coming to us where we are. And so, and restoring where we should be. I know, I love doing that stuff. That's Orthodox theology. You always have these little twists, right? We're doing this so we could do that. We do that so we could do this. So. Anyway, so that's why it's not logical. Yes, it is. Okay, so, the first, what? Theological, right. Not logical. No, we do have lots of logic. Too much logic sometimes. So anyway, let's start with the Sunday it's going to happen this Sunday, which is the Sunday of the Forefathers. And the Sunday of the Forefathers is 2 Sundays before the Nativity. So again, we know that's a fixed date, December 25th, so we know when the Sundays will happen before that. It depends on what day of the week Christmas falls, because if Christmas falls on a Monday, then that, so you can have a little bit, on the whole, 2 Sundays, it's pretty simple. And so that is called the Sunday of the Forefathers. The first Sunday, the Sunday before Christmas, is called the Sunday of the Fathers. So don't get it mixed up. There's a reason. So who are the Forefathers? We were just talking about this. Anybody? Come on.
Well, it's cheating if we do.
Come on, Basil, you know, because we just talked about it.
Abraham.
Well, amongst them.
Old Testament figures.
All the Old Testament people that were prefiguring and waiting for the coming of Christ. And so that's really, so if we had the icon, which we don't, that's why we have the icon of the visit of the 3 angels to Abraham is what I put out, because that's as close as we get to Old Testament. But that icon would be all the Old Testament figures. And but it's really interesting when we get to this what the readings are that the church chose. So anyway, I'm not going to... Father Hopko has a great quote on this, and I'm going to give it to you. And I want you to put it in the back of your brain, because that's what my sermon is on Sunday. So I don't want to reveal my sermon on Sunday yet. Actually, I had 2 of them, and I kept going back and forth. And this afternoon, I decided which one I'm going to do. So anyway, so here it is. Father Hopko, in this book, The Winter Pascha, on the Sunday of the Forefathers, in that chapter, he says, there is a great difference between existing and living. Many people exist. Very few really live. Only those who seek God have life. The holy forefathers and mothers, together with all their descendants, had chosen life. They find it in God's Messiah. And so that's why we honor them. Now, this was actually a bit of a controversy. Like, why should we honor the people in the Old Testament? Because they didn't have the grace of Christ. They weren't, but yet they're considered saints in the church. And there's a whole category of saints dedicated to just the Old Testament figures who lived that good and righteous life. And why did they live that good and righteous life? Not only because of obedience to God, but in anticipation of God. They had the hope, and you'll hear that in the tropar that we'll talk about. Matter of fact, which we'll talk about right now, because I'll say it. So, here's the troparion for this Sunday. Through faith you justified the forefathers, betrothing them through the church of the Gentiles. These saints exalt in glory, for from their seed came forth a glorious fruit. And she who bore you without seed, so by their prayers, O Christ, our God, have mercy on us. It sounds much better when you sing it, and you don't want me to sing tone 2 or any tone, so trust me, it's more beautiful and poetic when it's sung. The Kontakion, remember, that's like the secondary one. You did not worship the graven image, O thrice blessed ones. I'll explain why we're doing that. But armed with the immortal essence of God, you were glorified in the trial by fire. From the midst of the unbearable flames, you called on God, crying, Hasten, O compassionate one, speedily come to our aid, for for you are merciful and able to do us as you will. Who are we referring to there? No, it's not the three angels. There's three.
Thrice. What was it again? Thrice.
You did not worship the graven image, O thrice blessed one, and but you were glorified in a trial by fire. Think of an Old Testament story.
Moses at the burning bush?
No.
The
The three youths. That's as you say, the three youths.
Youths?
Yeah, the youths, the three youths. The three youths in Daniel, right? And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Why would the church take them and honor them? When do we hear the reading? George, you should know. When do we hear the reading of them? Holy Saturday, right. Holy Saturday, during one of the 15 Old Testament readings. But we also hear it prefigured on the Sunday of the Forefathers. Anyone take a guess why?
Winter Pascha?
Close. There's something that happens while they're in the fire. First of all, they didn't worship the graven image.
I have to admit, I don't know the story.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar, this was in the Babylonian captivity, and the king Nebuchadnezzar, who wanted all the people to worship him. And so he had, if you hear any music, you hear, I love the way it's written, whenever you hear the trigon, the lyre, you're supposed to go down and worship this image he created.
Okay.
And it was very specific, gold head and silver arms and all this other stuff.
Oh, it was like
Right. So three of these Jewish men who were in captivity in Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refused to worship the idol, and they said they only worshipped God.
God.
And so they threw them into the fire.
Didn't they not burn?
Right. And they threw them into the fire, and they still refused. So they threw in all this stuff, and they made it super, super hot. And as I like the way it says, and inside the furnace was like a moist, whistling wind.
Wow.
Moist, whistling wind. And they were seen walking around there. But in the midst of that flame, there was a figure.
There was a figure, right?
They see it says this in the story, that there's a figure walking with them. Who do you think
Christ?
Christ.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's one of the prefigurements of Christ.
That's one of the prefigurements of Christ. The true God, not consumed by the fire, virginity, right? Mary's not being consumed by the fire. And that they will only worship the true God. So they're honored. So actually, there's a Russian tradition called the Yolka, not the polka, the Yolka. And the Yolka was that on this day, the Sunday of the Forefathers, the kids would do a play in the church. And the play would be the three children in the play, fathers.
Wow.
When you say Mary wasn't consumed by the fire, is that
Ever virginity.
like giving in to temptation?
Yeah. So the connection then that they see is this connection. It's like the paradigm of the Old Testament readings prefiguring Christ. All right, so that's why they refer to them in the hymn. With me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, all that good stuff, right? The Holy Forefathers, we're all going to come. We're all going to have great, we're waiting for Christ, and Christ is going to come, and we honor them for their faithfulness. Yet listen to the readings that the church gives us at the liturgy. So the first one is the Epistle from Colossians 3:4-11. And it begins, this is Paul writing to the Colossians. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. And then it goes on to tell us how we should and how it's open to all, Greek and Jew, circumcised, uncircumcised, everyone. So you think that the church is saying, here's this line of people, of Old Testament prophets, faithful to Israel, God's chosen people, the ones who have been waiting and are going to bring forth the Messiah. And the church says, yeah, that doesn't really matter. What matters is if you believe in Christ.
Yeah.
What matters is that it doesn't matter what your background is. If you come to Christ, that's all that matters. So isn't it interesting the church takes that, honoring all the ones who came before, and then saying, it's important, but this is more important. So, and then it gets even better. Because the gospel reading is from Luke 14, 16 to 24. And that's the parable of the supper. The king has a supper, and he invites everyone to come to the supper. And one by one, everyone makes an excuse. Oh, I have a new wife. I have to go take care of my cattle. I have to do this. I have to do that. And there's no one at the banquet. And then the king goes, go out into the highways and the byways and compel, that's what he says, compel them to come in. Isn't that interesting too? That all the people who should have been there, who should have known, and by the way, this is not just the Old Testament, this is us. The people who have been given everything, and you don't come, go out and give it to someone else. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah, what, Adam?
Nah, I'm just thinking I overslept in the morning, so
Yeah.
I should have come.
Yeah, So we Orthodox who have the fullness of the faith, we should know better, right?
Well, we can never measure up.
No, but we should know better.
Right.
Because if not, it's going to be given to someone else. And so it's all about this idea, the forefathers, is preparation, right, and faithfulness. That's the theme that goes between the Old Testament saints that we talk about and those two readings. Are you prepared because God prepared us? And are you faithful because they were faithful? And look what we're about to celebrate. And so that's how we enter the Nativity cycle. Okay, any questions on that? I'm looking at any questions here? No? Okay. So, let's go to the next one. Sunday of the Fathers. So this is the Sunday before Nativity, right? So this is the Sunday of the Fathers. And this is the most favorite one for the priest. Because you get to read all these great names that you will never say anywhere else in your life. Abuyad, Jehoshaphat, and all those. We had to practice at seminary.
There's Jehoshaphat, right?
Yeah, we had to practice these names in front of the teachers to make sure that you pronounce them correctly. And some of them are just not for Western tongues.
Spelling counts.
No, spelling doesn't count here. Just pronunciation counts. And then Father Tosi, who was the Old Testament professor, who was a very volatile Arab man. Let's just put it that way. He would throw his Bible at the students if he asked a stupid question. And he knew his pronunciations perfectly. No, you have no idea what you're doing. Go back down, sit down, think about this. And then you come back and try it again. No wonder he had 5 heart attacks and he broke a desk in class one time. Got so mad. Anyway, that's fun. So what do? So the first reading is from Hebrews 11, 9 through 10, 17 to 23, 32 to 40. Let me explain that. Sometimes you'll notice in the readings we skip, rather than reading the entire passage, they'll take little sections out and you just sort of skip to certain passages. Because the church is this is the important thing, because sometimes the passages can go wandering off, and remember, the church is trying to give you they're trying to make a point, right? So they'll do that because they want to get to the point, rather than kind of meander.
Are those all separate readings, or are they one reading?
It's one reading.
But pieces.
But in pieces,
Okay.
right. Which, usually they're close. There's a couple times where it really skips and you have to have multiple marks in your Bible to make sure you go to the right place. Or you get the Bible that has the reading all put together. I usually just print it out so it's all together. Anyway, so what does this say? This is a beautiful reading. And what it does, it goes to the list of all these forefathers. And it goes, by faith, Abraham did this. And by faith, Isaac did this. And by faith, Jacob did this. And he goes to this whole list, the Apostle Paul, of all these great descendants. And then he goes, and this is the key line, for all of these have attained a good testimony through faith and did not receive the promise. So in other words, they were all good, and they were all good, but they didn't receive the promise. They were waiting for the promise, which is the Messiah. For God has provided something better for us, and that they should not be made perfect apart from us. In other words, he's saying, all these great men, All these great people, all these great prophets and leaders, they were great. But they didn't have what we have, Christ. And therefore, we should be better. We should know better. Because now we see the fulfillment of everything they were waiting for. And how do we know that? The next reading tells us. So that's the gospel reading. Now, in the New Testament, there are two readings of the genealogy of Christ. One is from Matthew, which is the one we will be reading, and the other one is from Luke. And they go in two different directions. Luke goes backwards, but Matthew always goes forward. And the starting points or ending points are different. In other words, the Luke one goes all the way back to Adam, whereas the Matthew one goes back to it goes back to Abraham. All right, why? Because Abraham's the one who's the promise, right? So, and it's very interesting how it says it, because each generation he says so and so begat so and so. And so begat so-and-so. And so begat so. And so it's not this idea, whereas in the Luke one, it says so-and-so is the son of. And so it's going backwards. And why are we doing the begats? I love it because you say begat so many times. Because it's always showing how it's always going forward. Everything is being brought forward. And it's interesting, too, because there are some, again, we know a lot about in that list, and there's some we know nothing about other than their name. And there's some that we know, and there's a couple women who are mentioned, but they're peripherally mentioned, and they're not. One of them is definitely not the nicest of women, shall we say. But it's, again, I'm not to dwell on that point, but that list is so important because it shows humanity. This is where we come from, saints and sinners and all that. Priests are in there, prophets are in there, kings are in there, regular people are in there. All of it is there, all leading up. And again, we talked about this, I think, last class. It all leads to Joseph. Even though Joseph biologically is not the father of Christ, he is the righteous one who protects him. And so he gets his kind of justification through Joseph. Right? Even though I always found this interesting, in Judaism, you trace your Judaism through your mother.
Mom,
yeah, you trace it through your mother. But in this case, they're tracing it through the father in the faith. And we'll learn more about that when I give my sermon on that. So again, I don't want to preview.
No spoilers.
But then after it goes, and it has the 14 generations to this, and then it recounts it. So there were 14 generations from Abraham to the captivity in Babylon, 14 generations of the captivity of Babylon to the restoration in Israel, then 14 generation restoration in Israel to Joseph. And that's an important number. 14 is an important biblical number for Judaism. It has a lot to do with sign of completion of cycles, shall we say. Sometimes they go on a 14 cycle. So it's an important sort of thing. And of course, you got biblical scholars who try to prove that it was actually 14 generations. And, and they get, that's not the point. All right, that's not the point. But then we hear something at the end of that genealogy. We hear the first announcement of the Nativity. Right? We hear the first announcement because this is what it says. Now the birth of Jesus was as follows. Right? After his mother Mary was betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with a child of the Holy Spirit. Then Joseph, her husband, being a just man, and not wanting to make her a public example, was minded to put her away secretly. But while he thought about these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take to you Mary as your wife, for that which she has conceived is of the Holy Spirit. And she will bring forth a son, and you will call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins.
What does it mean to put her away? Is what I think it means?
Yeah, well, she would be, she would be put into like a home for unwed mothers or something like that.
Such a thing back then?
Yeah, no, they probably would have stoned her. They would have stoned her.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that she was already bearing Christ when they married.
Yep.
I didn't know that. That's
Yep.
really interesting.
Yep. So what do we hear here? It's the justification of why Joseph was the one that the genealogy led to, because he did what was right.
Sorry, just for clarity, put her away means hide her, right?
No.
What does it mean? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I always took that as like hide her, put her
It
somewhere.
wasn't until just now that I really started to say, ooh, I think I know what that really means.
Yeah. They would either stone her for adultery, or she would be exiled.
And she was like 13, correct?
She was young. Yeah. She was a young maiden. I don't think 13. I don't know. But again, Joseph was an elderly man. He was a priest in the temple. It was very common for people, young virgins, to be brought up in the temple, and kind of like being nuns in a certain sense. So if she's pregnant, it's like, what's going on in the temple there? Yeah, something. And so that's all part of that sort of story there. And then what ends up happening is,
I never got that.
what?
I never got that before, but I really thought put her away was like hide her until.
No. Yeah.
That's an important piece.
Yes, it is. So that's why he was the protector. He was the protector of her. And then, of course, he's an elderly man.
Right.
We'll talk about that later. But anyway, and then he hears what's going to happen. So that's really the key. So that's the first time we hear that something is about to happen, and this is what's going to happen. And then it goes on. And so this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, Behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which is translated, God is with us. Then Joseph, being aroused from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and took to him his wife, and did not know her till she brought forth her firstborn son, and he called his name Jesus. So there it is, the first nativity story that we're telling. Again, we go a little bit forward. Now we're going to step a little bit back. All right. So that's the whole announcement. And again, in a certain sense, Joseph is really honored two times. It's this Sunday, and then the Sunday after Christmas. We honor him.
So what's the Emmanuel part?
Emmanuel is just another way of saying Jesus.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I'll probably, I don't know if I will. Maybe I will. I have an icon. I have a polizza that's a hand-painted icon by my wife's uncle who did all this. And he gave me the icon of Christ as Emmanuel, which is showing him as a young man without a beard, because I was the youngest of all the priests in the family. So, and it has the, and so that's what it's Christ is Emmanuel, God is with us. Yeah.
The last line the Protestants often question.
Oh, here we go.
What is the literal meaning of
did not know her till she gave birth? That doesn't mean he knew her, biblically, if you know what I mean.
Right.
It meant that he did not, I won't say, I'm not going to hit Basil till he, leaves the room, sort of thing. It's a bad translation. It doesn't translate correctly in English, but there's a really great explanation Father John Matusiak wrote. It's on the OCA website, where he goes in really in depth and why that word means what it means. And it doesn't mean that he did know her. He just meant that he did not know her, even after she gave birth. That's the better way to translate it from the Greek. And yet, in the English, and then they all start arguing about it.
Right.
And it's not that the church is saying sex is bad. It's just the whole point of the virgin birth, right? So that's the whole point, and that's steeped in the theology.
I guess their argument, though, is it doesn't negate the virgin birth, though.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, that's really weird.
But it's clear.
She wasn't just like every other.
Right. Well, pure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The gate from the east, which remained shut. Right. Only God will pass through. Right. How can anything other than after God has passed through? How can anything else?
Right.
That's probably the easiest way to put it. And that's as far as I'm going to get into that argument, because otherwise we'll sit here for 20 minutes and I'll give you a deep theological explanation. So
Enough said.
that's it.
Enough said.
Enough said. So again, so that's Sunday of the Father, so we still got a lot to go through. So let's listen to the Tropar and the Kontakion, right? So
Yes.
You're going to sing it?
No.
No. Okay. Here's the first Tropar. Great are the accomplishments of faith, for the three holy youths rejoice in the flames as though as waters rest. And the prophet Daniel appeared as shepherds to the lions as though they were sheep. So by their prayers, O Christ our God, save our souls. We're going back to that imagery. Not only the forefathers, but the fathers. Because again, when you go through the genealogy, you'll hear these names being mentioned. And then the Kontakion. Rejoice, Bethlehem. Prepare yourself, O Ephrathah. Ephrathah. You'll hear that word a lot. Ephrathah is one in the prophecy. It's another place. It's like Bethlehem is the city. Ephrathah is like the county.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's what it is. The lamb is on her way to give birth to the chief shepherd she carries in her womb. The God-bearing forefathers will rejoice beholding him. And with the shepherds, they will glorify the virgin nursing him. Sounds better when you sing it. But, so again, we're prefiguring. Yeah.
So I imagine there have to be some overlap between the forefathers and the fathers.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what happened is that originally that was the same
List?
feast.
Ah, okay.
And I think as the church developed, it kind of divided out. And they
That
wanted
kind
to
of
get...
makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff happened after 325, the First Ecumenical Council, and the church started really opening up a lot of their services to kind of give you a more fulfilling idea of what's going on. However, because there's always a however in the Orthodox Church, right? If the Sunday of Nativity falls on December 18th or 19th, I joke not, this is in the rubrics, you have a different Kontakion. Right? Only if it falls on the 18th and 19th.
What is it about those 2 days?
I'll tell you in a second. Listen to the hymn. You did not worship the graven image, O thrice blessed one, but armed with the immaterial essence of God, you were glorified in the trial by the fire. And in the midst of the unbearable flames, you called on God crying, hasten, O compassionate one, speedily come to our aid, so you are merciful and able to do as you will. So it's again back to Daniel and the three youths, but much more, because that is the 18th and 19th is the day that we celebrate Daniel, actually. Celebrate them on that day. And the three youths.
Happening this year.
What?
That's happening this year. Right? This Sunday. You're talking about the Sunday.
Oh, it
No,
will
the
be.
Sunday after.
Oh, the Sunday after
Yeah,
the
you're
Nativity.
right.
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah, because that's the 19th.
It's the 18th. It'll be 11th and then 18th.
Yeah, the 18th, so that will be this year. That will happen.
wait. When does this happen? The Sunday
If it's the Sunday of the Fathers,
of the Fathers, which is this week before.
falls on the 18th or
That's
19th.
going to happen.
19th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 18th this year.
So we have a
Oh,
special,
that's right. You're right.
19th, right?
yeah. So we have a special Kontakion because it falls on that day.
So we don't do the other one? Or you do both?
You don't do the other one.
The one you just read, we do not do.
The one that I just read is the one we will do.
Okay.
The
more
one before that
specific-
we won't do.
Who's on first?
It's the same imagery, by the way, but sort of. But it's just more emphasis on this than the other. Why? Because someone had too much time sitting there trying, how can we mess up the choir directors, when we come back to this. Anyway, so that's it on those. So let's get, what time is it?
20 to 8.
Okay, that we should have plenty. We should be able to do this in 20 minutes. Just the Christmas services, right? So if you remember, there were a series of cycles of Christmas service. The Royal Hours. Then we had the Vesperal Liturgy with the 8 Old Testament readings. Then we had the Festal Vigil, which was Compline and Matins. That's on the evening. And then on the day of the service of Christmas Day, we have the Festal Liturgy with the special hymns and all that other stuff. If it falls on another day of the week, it can get all jumbled, but we're just going to stick with this one because, of course, right? So just go with it. So, Royal Hours. First, third, sixth, and ninth hour, right? They're all compressed. And all of them have that same sort of cycle, each hour.
What time is the first hour?
6 o'clock a.m. It's 6, 9, 12, 6, 9, 12, 3.
All into one.
So,
Why did they start at, just out of curiosity?
6 a.m.?
Yeah, instead of like midnight.
But midnight service is called nocturne.
Okay.
So this is the cycle. Let's go briefly through the cycle. So you start from sunset, right? There was evening, there was morning one day in Genesis. So all our cycles. So that's why we have Vespers. By the end of Vespers, you're in the next day.
Okay.
Right? So Vespers is the service for the setting of the sun. Compline is the one that you go before you send them off to bed. And that's usually served, could be around 9 to 10, whatever. In seminary, it was usually around 9. Then, nocturne is the midnight service, because you can't let the monks and nuns sleep through the night, right? They get a couple hours sleep, you wake them up, you bring them, you pray, then you send them back to do their work. And like when I was at St. Catherine's in the Sinai, you did your work at night, because it's too hot during the day to do anything, really. So you do a lot of your some of your work during night. So then you have that. Then matins is the service when the sun comes up, right? And so in there, the sun will come up early, like on the equator or whatever. So then you have the first hour, the third hour, the sixth hour, the ninth hour, which is a military watch, corresponding to the military watch. And then you're back to Vespers. And if you have liturgy, it fits between the matins and the first hour. The matins and the third hour.
So then what's orthos in the Greek church?
Matins.
They combine.
They combine them.
Got it.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, whereas there are two typicons. There's a Greek typicon and a Slavic one, the Marsaba and the Great Church. The Greeks use the Great Church one, which is based off of Constantinople. The Slavic world uses the Marsaba, which is a monastery in Jerusalem, which is based on the monastic life. So, there you go.
Thank you.
Now you know.
I'm still learning so much.
But if you have the royal hours, that's all 4 of them put together in one service. And it was royal because the emperor came, and it was like, it had a message.
Is it condensed or is it all the services?
The whole service is
How long is that?
about an hour. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did they condense it because it would be easier for the emperor to just attend it once rather than like make him wake up a whole bunch of times?
No, but because it's only done at a couple times during the church
It
year,
makes sense to do.
it's
Okay.
like a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
The hours that we read on Sunday, that's the third.
Right. We should be reading the 3rd and the 6th hour.
Is that, what we read, is that the whole thing, or is that actually abridged?
Okay,
What
so
we read on Sunday. Yeah.
that's actually the whole thing. We just do one, and we should do 2 of them. We just do the 6th hour, I think.
Is it the sixth?
I think it's the 6th.
Okay.
No, maybe it's, I don't know. I have to look at it. But that's different than the royal hours,
Right.
right?
All the royal hours.
Have different sets of psalms and stuff. Yeah. Because the whole point of the royal hours is this. So this is important. This will explain it. It consists of a series of psalms. Then it has a tropar. Then it has some hymns on the tropar. Then it has a prokimenon of the prophecy. So it's a prokimenon, it's related to the prophecy. And then it has an Old Testament reading, which is the prophecy, then the epistle and the gospel, and then some final hymns. It takes about 15 minutes.
So that's for each one.
Each one, yeah. So you have a set of psalms, because we always do everything with psalms, and then you have kind of the theme, and then it's going to tell you about one of the prophecies, and then it's going to have the epistle and the gospel reading. And the gospel readings are usually the different versions of the same event. So for Christmas, it'll be the 4 readings about the gospel. Unfortunately, there are only 3. Actually, there are only 2. Matthew and Luke. Because John doesn't have a nativity narrative. And Mark starts with the baptism of Christ. So it divides Matthew into 3 parts, basically, and then the one Luke. But like for if we do it on Holy Friday, it's the 4 accounts of the crucifixion from the 4 different Gospels. And so here are the readings. So the first one is the first prophecy is from Micah 5:2-4, and that's the one where we hear about Bethlehem being the place where the Savior will be born. All right. Then Hebrews 1:1-12, how God speaks to his people in various ways. I'm giving you the summary. And then Matthew 1:18-25, the one we heard the last Sunday of the Fathers. So that's how it starts out. It repeats that one. So the next one, the next hour, the third hour, is from Baruch or Jeremiah. You could call it Jeremiah. Baruch was the scribe who wrote it. Jeremiah was the prophet. So sometimes the church will say the reading is from Baruch. It means it's from Jeremiah. And that's from the return of God to his people, how God's going to come to his people. And then we have Galatians 3:23-29. All are sons of God through faith and baptism, so prefiguring. And then Luke 2:1-20. So that's the Luke version and how they ended up in Bethlehem and the story of the Nativity and then how the angels came and everyone's like praising God. With me? What's wrong?
No, I was yawning, sorry.
Oh, okay. 6th hour, Isaiah 7-8. How God will come and a virgin will bear a child. Okay, so there you go. Hebrews, how God has worked and lay low his enemies. God is working. And then Matthew 2:1-12, we continue the story of the where Herod come, how the wise men come and Herod sends them and they come and the wise men come and bring the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And then the 9th hour is Isaiah 9. That's the one that we'll hear. Oh, for unto us a child is born. That one. See, that's why I don't sing. Hebrews 2, which talks about how God sanctifies humanity. And then Matthew 2:13-23, where we hear about the massacre of the innocents and the flight to Egypt and how they settle in Nazareth. And so that's with the roll hour. So it's giving you the stories. It's giving you the main prophecies. It's related to the gospel reading that you're about to hear. So it connects it.
It's souls.
Right. Okay, so that's the royal hours. Yay. We'll do that one day. They're fun.
Do you have to do them daily as a priest?
The hours? No.
I didn't know if that...
No, I mean, if you're in a monastery, you do. Seminary, you don't. But if you're in a monastic, yeah, you'll go and you'll get into the cycle. And that's why I don't stay at the monastery. I stay in the hotel. So anyway, I didn't say that. Oh yeah, that just went out. Yeah, there we go. So the next service, the Vesperal Liturgies. Now this is the Vesperal Liturgy of St. Basil. So this is one of the 3. If it falls on a Sunday, then the St. Basil and St. John Chrysostom liturgies gets switched. I don't know why. But St. Basil liturgy, right? So a Vesperal Liturgy is a Vesper service and a liturgy that's put together. The main component of this is the Old Testament readings. Like when we have a feast day, right? We do the Vespers, and we have the 3 Old Testament readings. Just think of it that way. This is just, now we have 8.
So we also take communion at that Vesperal
Yes.
liturgy. Wow.
Yeah. And then on Pascha, on Holy Saturday, we do 15 Old Testament readings. So anyway, so here are very briefly, the Old Testament readings. So see if you can find the connection. Genesis 1:1-13. The first 3 days of creation. Right? The first 3 days of creation, going from the creation of all to the creation of vegetation, not the creation of humanity yet. Next one is Numbers 24. The restoration of Israel and how a star will come out and lead his people. Micah is the next one, 4:6-5. How we are all lost, we need healing, and Bethlehem will show us the way. Okay. The next one, Isaiah 11:1-10. Talks about the rod of Jesse, how and the lineage that will come out of there, and how through that lineage You hear that the lion will sleep with the lamb, and everyone will be happy and sing kumbaya, right? So again, explaining what the Messiah is. The next one, Jeremiah 3:35. How can you compare the glory of God to us fallen humanity? Okay. Next one, Daniel 2:3. It's all about don't worship false idols, and how God will crush everybody who's against him. Yay. There's some good stuff in the Old Testament. Isaiah 9:6-7. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. And then the last one, Isaiah again 7:10 onward. That you are looking for a sign, and that sign will come, and it will be a child who will be born of the virgin, and he will kind of shatter everything of our preconceptions. So when you look at that, and you step back and say, wow, how did you miss this? Right? All those prophecies were talking about what was going to happen. So what the church does is it takes those 8 main ones, and it brings them into the service, and says, this is what they were talking about, and now we're going to celebrate it. And then when you go and you shift to the St. Basil liturgy, which you do at the point of, it would be after the little entrance, but before the little entrance, actually, for Holy Art Thou Our God, which would be after when we sing the Tropar sequence. Then you shift right into Holy God, but in this case, we don't sing Holy God. We sing as many as have been baptized into Christ. Whenever you hear that hymn instead of Holy God, that means it was a baptism day in the church.
I've never heard that hymn yet.
Yeah, you will. Yeah, so major feast days, when you'll hear them singing that instead of the other one, that means that was a day when the church would do massive baptisms. And then that's the transition, and we go right into the liturgy of St. Basil, which if you read the first part of the anaphora, that's the hymn on the consecration, you're going to hear the whole story of why Christ had to come. So that's why it connects together for the liturgy. And then we go, and everything is pretty much the liturgy at that point. And in the epistle at the liturgy is 2 Timothy, how God changed the appearance, how God taking on human flesh changed all things. And then the gospel reading is from Matthew or from Luke, where we repeat the one that we just heard that morning on one of the hours. So we're just repeating them now. Okay? Almost there. Next one is the festal vigil. Now, normally a vigil is matins and vespers and matins put together. In this case, it's complement matins because we already did vespers in the Vesperal Liturgy, so you can't do it twice. So now we have the compline service and matins come together. Remember this, with matins, that's always the sort of the real theological announcement of the feast. And then it's stamped with the liturgy. So if we did the vigil here on a Saturday night, you have like a certain type of readings that you do. It's called the Pillar of 11 resurrectional readings that you go through every 11 weeks, and you go back, and it has all this sort of different things, because that's our great announcement. So when we do the matins for a feast day, and you'll see them, you'll see how the service kind of changes its character from being Vespers, which is dark, to matins, which is being light and happy and joyful.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there a point in the service where it goes from prefigurement to now, this has been delivered to us?
At matins.
Okay.
At matins is always that point, right? The Vespers is the prep. The matins is the announcement. Okay, so what do we have? Well, the vigil, first off, compline is different than as many parishes that we have, Orthodox churches in the United States, is as many different versions of compline that we have. Because if you did the full compline thing, it would take you about 2 hours. And so every priest kind of gets the greatest hits. Well, we pretty much do what they do at the seminary here. And so, because compline is technically 3 parts, and there's all these different things. So we do the greatest hits of compline. And the thing that everyone knows about Christmas Eve is that beautiful hymn, God is with us, understand all nations and submit yourselves. That's at every compline service, every day in the church. but yet they always associate that one
Christmas.
with Christmas, because that's the only time they really ever see Compline. So basically what Compline has is it's a series of psalms, prayers, prayers from the Old Testament, like the prayer of Manasseh. It is prophecies, and then we have the blessing of the wheat, the loaves, wheat, wine, and oil at the end of Compline. Okay, so that's basically, it happens, it's just a series of prayers that you just think of this, you're getting ready to go to bed, so you're going to pray before you go to bed. And then we go into the 6 Psalms, which is the transition point to Matins. There's a thing called the 6 Psalms, the Hekasama, which are 6 Psalms, which are read at every Matin service. And then we go into the Matin service, which the basic highlights are the Great Litany, why is it escaping me now? The stone which your builder has rejected has become the head of the corner. And then we have these beautiful hymns, the Palileos, which means the many mercies. And that's when the priest is out here and he's sensing, and it's the many mercies, and it's very joyful. And then we have what's called the magnification. So the priest, in my case, a very bad voice, sings, we magnify you, and it has the theme of the day. And then they sing this beautiful hymn, and the priest senses around with the candle. And then when he's done with that, they have the Song of Ascent, which is the hymn, the psalm that was sung as you would walk up the steps in the temple in Jerusalem. And then he would bring the gospel out and he would read it. And in this case, the priest reads the gospel in the middle of the church. And then after that, he brings it back in. There is a cant. So that gospel reading is the real announcement. Like, now we're here. Right. Now we're here. This is it. And then there's the canon. Remember, the canon is that long poetic hymn of 9 odes. And then we go on, through some other points of the Matin service. So that's basically what it is. So and in this case also, we have the Prokimenon of the prophecy, which talks about out of the womb before the morning star have I begotten thee, which you'll hear over and over again that night and then at the liturgy the next morning. And then the reading is from Mark 1:18-25, which is again the story of Joseph. And the beautiful doxology, there's the great doxology, the great praise, there's the great Expostolarium, which you'll hear sung 3 times on special hymns. It's really like the real celebration begins. And then the priest will anoint everybody, right? That's how we always do feast days. And so the Matins is that beautiful sort of celebration of the feast, which puts its stamp the next day on the feast, on Christmas Day, the liturgy. The liturgy is the stamp, right? The celebration begins at Matins. The liturgy is the stamp. And so we have the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and we have special hymns. So you'll hear the first 3 antiphons won't be the ones that we normally hear. It'll be Psalm 111, which gives thanksgiving to God. Psalm 112, bless those who believe. And then Psalm 110, which gets interspersed with the tropar of Christmas. And Psalm 110 is basically the triumph of the Lord. So we're giving thanks, we're getting blessings, and we're talking about the triumph of the birth of Christ. And then we have, you'll have a special hymn, and then again, know holy God. It'll be as many as been baptized. And then the 2 readings are Galatians 4:4-7. In the fullness of time, God has sent his Son to redeem us. And then Matthew 2:1-12, again, the story of Christmas, of the birth of Christ and Herod sending the kings. So very often on that day, depending on what day, but that's also, not only do we celebrate Christmas, but we celebrate the coming of the kings, the 3 kings, and offering the sacrifice. Yeah?
I may have missed it. Why again? I know the baptism, if there were a lot of baptisms, that's the one you sing, but if there were no baptisms that day, why are we singing that one?
Because it's part of that tradition of the church, that this was a baptism.
I didn't know if there was like a...
No, because even whether we have a baptism or not, we still sing it.
Okay.
Yeah. So sometimes I try to arrange baptisms around that. But then you're getting older and I can't do all of that so much as I used to. So when the time comes, if I can arrange a baptism on a baptismal
It would
day,
have worked well for me if I wouldn't have been baptized.
Yeah, it would have. I would have probably done it on
Yeah.
Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, but we just have to chrismate you. So anyway, so that's it on the service on that Christmas Day. Now there's two more things and we're done. So remember we have, in Christmas we don't only celebrate the day of Christmas, but we have this second day of Christmas and the third day of Christmas, right? So the second day is easy. Remember, the second day of a feast always is some important character in the feast. So in this case, it's Mary, the Theotokos, obviously. So, but it's very interesting because the two readings here, and again, it's a festal service, so it's the same as we do on Christmas Day, but there's a shift in the readings. And the two readings, one is from Galatians, and how Paul became a Christian. He tells his story of how he did this, which is related to the next day, by the way. And then Matthew 2, which is the massacre of the innocents, and how, and then it tells about fleeing to Nazareth. So it continues that story. And then we have the next day is St. Stephen's Day, right?
My family name.
Your family name. We call that in Serbian, they call that the Slava.
The Slava.
The Slava, which means kind of like the praise, the glory. So whatever Slava saint you have, your family saint. So it's very interesting. Why is the third day? It's simply because that's the date, not by Christmas, but date when in the church year when Stephen was martyred.
I was going to say something about deacons.
Yeah, so he got martyred. But it's interesting because the story, the epistle is from Acts, and it tells the story. But it's very important because that's where Paul first started to consider Christianity. Because he was present at the martyrdom of Stephen. He was a Pharisee. And he witnessed it. And in fact, he kind of hints.
I was about to say, is he responsible for it?
He kind of agitated, and he hints that he may have been one of the people stoning and participating in the murder. But he sees the faithfulness of Stephen, and that starts his journey from being a Pharisee to being a Christian.
He would have been Saul at that time.
Yeah. And then the reading is from Matthew, which talks about the wicked vine dressers who killed the son. So anyway, in the West, it's Boxing Day, right? They call that.
Yeah.
The day after is Boxing Day, which.
I thought that was Canada.
Yeah, that's a Canadian thing?
No, it's a British thing.
Oh.
British. So Canadians took that on. So yeah. Anyway, so now just one last thing before we finish this up. So the Sunday after, so you have, not only do you have the Sunday before, but you have the Sunday after. So whenever that Sunday after is, which sometimes can get mixed up with Theophany because we're already on the heels of Theophany, depending on how it works out.
More loopholes.
What?
More loopholes.
More loopholes. But that's the day that we celebrate the righteous ones. So that's David the king, Joseph the betrothed, and James the just, the brother of the Lord. 3 people who show the faithfulness in protecting Christ. And it's also the day that we celebrate that the 3 kings, the Magi, return. You know, they're gone. So I think in the Italian tradition, isn't it 3 Kings Day? When is 3 Kings Day? What?
I think it's the 6th or 7th.
December
I think it's January 6th or 7th.
6th or 7th. Yeah. So again, it could, depending on what day of the week it falls, because Sunday, Christmas and Sunday depends on which. So it could be that's where it works, but it's usually for the Orthodox, it's whatever the Sunday is after Christmas. So if like Christmas is on a Sunday, it could be a whole week. But if Christmas is, so it gets, you get it. It can get a little confusing. It's all about faithfulness in God. So anyway, and then finally the 8th day. After that is January 1st, which is St. Basil's Day, which is also the circumcision, and everything is related to that. And it's interesting. I was looking like, why 8? Why is the 8 so important? Well, the 8th day for Orthodox theology is the day outside of creation. 7 days, and then there's the special day. Sunday is usually called the 8th day. It's the day unlike any other day because it's a celebration of the resurrection, even though calendar-wise, it's 7.
When you explained that to me, it explained so much.
Yeah. But it's interesting. In Jewish tradition, why would they do 8th-day circumcision? Because it guaranteed the child one Sabbath before it was dedicated to God. No matter what day it was born, it would guarantee that there would be at least one Sabbath that the newborn would be able to celebrate before dedicating it. So, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I'm going to have to ask my rabbi friend on that one. And so anyway, so there we go. And again, it could, that Sunday after, anyway, we went through that. So there it is. I'm going to read to you one last thing from St. John of Kronstadt, who has, by the way, if you really are interested, the really great sermons, church father sermons that I think of, ancient ones, St. Gregory of Nazianzus, St. Gregory of Nyssa, writing about their Christmas sermons are masterful. St. John of Kronstadt, who's more modern, has a series of about 8 Christmas sermons that are just incredible. And they're really, I usually, that's where I start when I start preparing my Christmas sermon. I usually start with St. John of Kronstadt, who was an interesting person, but nonetheless he was an amazing preacher. So anyway, so here we'll finish up with this. Why and for what reason was there such condescension shown on the part of the Creator toward his transgressing creatures, toward humanity, which, though an act of his own will, had fallen away from God, its Creator? It was by reason of his supreme and inexpressible mercy towards his creation on the part of the Master, who could not bear to see the entire race of mankind, which he, in creating, had endowed with wondrous gifts, enslaved by the devil, and thus destined for eternal suffering and torment. So why did he do this? Because he loves us. Because he loves us so much, he couldn't stand to see us be there. Are you lighting? Okay, so trying to see if there's any questions. So no real questions. Are you lighting candles? Yes, on Christmas Eve we do the lighting of the candles. On Christmas Eve vigil, people will hold lit candles. We didn't do that last year because of the weirdness of last year, but this year we will do that as well.
I think we did, didn't we?
I can't remember.
I was chrismated on that day. I held a candle.
Oh, you did, yeah, because that was your...
Are you talking about the vigil itself?
Yeah, at the vigil itself. Yeah, we'll do it for the gospel readings. Yeah. So, and God willing, the bell will be working. So, and if you look, I have the rubrics for the bell ringing in the back there already. So, yeah, I put it up there. Anyway, so that's it. So, are there questions?
I have like sort of a base question. It's
Go
not,
ahead.
like, very theological. Do we do these services, because it sounds like there's a lot of them. Do they fall at different times than our normal liturgy or Vespers? Like, I know that's just...
Yes, they do.
Maybe.
Yes.
Like, are they going to start earlier?
Yeah, we have a prescribed... You have a certain flexibility as a priest, like it should be done between this time and this time.
Yeah.
So I know, for example, especially when we get to Lent, I kind of mix, because I know I'll get one group at this time and another group if I do it at this time.
I'm sure that'll be in the email.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I try to, but if Vespers service you should do, it says in the instructions you should start at 3:00, right? Well, some priests will do the Vesperal Liturgy at 9 a.m.
Wow.
So just because it's just, you can do what you can do.
You do what you're going to do.
Yeah, and then the evening service, like I just changed the vigil. I don't know what I was thinking when I did this calendar. I was originally going to have it on Christmas Eve at 6:30, and I was like, no. And Chris Puza had to, that's really kind of late. And you're like, yeah, you're right. So I moved it to 5. I changed it to 5, which I think they used to do it at 4 here, which I just can't do a Vesperal Liturgy and then go right into that other. I need a break. So anyway, I threw a lot at you, but the whole point that I wanted you to see is how the church uses the scriptures, both Old Testament and New Testament, and uses the hymnology. And I just touched the surface on the hymnology to convey the message of why we're celebrating what we're celebrating. There's deep theology in this, transformational theology when you really think about it. And it's all there to help us explain and understand why we're doing what we're doing. So don't think of it as much as we all do. Me too. Like, another service. Think of what it is that we're saying in the service. And when you see what we're saying and why we're saying it, and we've been doing this for thousands of years, it makes a lot more sense to us and why we need to be here for that. It's not necessarily, though it's important, the celebration. It's what the celebration means. And not just to me personally or to you personally, but universally. We don't do these services so that Father Eric can do them or that St. Gregory Church can hear them. We do them for the salvation of the world.
For the life of the world.
Right. So that's the thing that people seem to forget. We're praying for everyone, for the entire world. We're celebrating for the entire world, even in this little place here in Wappingers Falls. And when you start to multiply that throughout the world and all the Orthodox celebrating, you could see what we're doing is we're consecrating the world. So remember that as we go through it and your legs start to hurt and you're starting to wander in your mind, which happens to all of us, is that what we're doing here has immense importance. And had, by the way, if I really want to blow your mind away, was all part of the plan before the creation of the world. That we were all going to gather here on December 25th in Wappingers Falls. And that was all taken into account before God even created the world. So that'll blow you away. We'll leave it at that. All right, let's do our final prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. It is truly meet to bless you, O Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure and the Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without corruption, you gave birth to God, the Word, true Theotokos. We magnify you. Through the prayers of the Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. Good night, good night, good night.